Once upon a time, the idea of robots was a symbol of a futuristic world, a world in which technology and machines would replace human labour.
To a large extent, that world is with us today in the 21st century. But the idea of robots, or at least automated machines, is much older than you might think.
During the heyday of a golden age of science between the 9th and 14th centuries, engineers from across the Islamic world, from the Middle East to southern Spain, built many incredible devices. Water clocks, automatic serving machines, and a number of other innovative creations. I'm Jamal Khalili, a British professor of theoretical physics, but born in Baghdad. I've been researching some of the mechanical wonders of this golden age of science and comparing them to the engineering and technological advances of the modern world. For years, we've been promised that we'd have robots in our homes carrying out household chores, and that hasn't really happened. Well, here's something that might change all that. In this lab, they're developing a prototype robot that we might, sometime soon, have in our kitchens at home.
This is the Molly Robotic Kitchen, a pair of fully computerized mechanical arms set in a purpose-built capsule. The arms replicate the movements of a human chef, and today, the robot's cooking me a crab bisque.
So you can see it moves not like a robot, you'd imagine, not on those kind of very simple movements you get from a robot, but a very human and fluid movement. Using motion capture, we've recorded the movements of a chef's hands while they're cooking a real recipe. And then this system will reproduce those movements exactly.
So in principle, it should be exactly as good a cook as a master chef.
According to the chef, it's more consistent than a human chef. So when a chef is cooking, they can't always get the timings and the temperatures and the amounts exactly right. It's interesting, we always get the same pattern of mess around the saucepan. Because it's a robot, we get the same drip.
Because it's repeating
Because it's
precisely
exactly
the same motions. I mean, at the moment, you have to have all the ingredients at exactly the right place because, of course, the robot is operating blind, isn't it?
It's operating blind, deaf, and numb, so it can't feel and it can't see what it's doing. One of the reasons robots haven't made it into the home yet is how difficult it is to do all the 3D vision in complex lighting environments and do all the planning.
Actually intelligently being able to make decisions like, oh, the salt is not where I thought it was going to be, find it, recognize it.
Yes, and even try to find it hiding behind something or mixed in with things that look similar.
The sort of things that we take for granted.
You find very, very easy, but a computer finds extremely hard. So we've taken a much simpler approach, and that's to standardize everything in the kitchen and make it a very controlled environment with controlled lighting and define positions for the ingredients.
Of course, this robot relies on the very latest technology. But what was the state of the art at the beginning of the Golden Age? Well, we find our answer in the Kitab al-Hiyal, or the Book of Tricks, written around 850 AD by the three Banu Musa brothers. The book contains a range of ingenious inventions and contraptions, everything from entertainment to making life easier. Things like water dispensing devices, a self-correcting lamp, and lots of different mechanical tools. They drew their inspiration from ancient Greek, Chinese, Persian, and Indian engineering. But it's believed that the inventions in the book go much further than anything else that had been seen before.
At the Museum of Islamic Art in Qatar, they've an early copy of the Kitab al-Hiyal in their collection.
I'm really excited about this manuscript, Bill, because it's probably one of the most famous texts of the medieval world.
The original was written in the mid-9th century by the Banu Musa, brothers.
One was an astronomer, one was a mathematician, and one was an
And the other
engineer.
was an engineer, yeah. And they were really the centre of scientific life in Baghdad during the golden age of science.
The Abbasid Caliph El-Ma'mun recognized the talents of the brothers from an early age and sent them to study in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where great texts were gathered from across the globe and translated into Arabic. During their time in the House of Wisdom, they grew in influence and even became patrons of other translators. As well as translation, they wrote many works of their own, including the Book of Tricks.
It's called the Kitab al-Hiyal, which literally means the book of tricks, or the book of trickery.
But they're not tricks in the sense of magic tricks. These are
No.
contraptions and devices, I guess executive toys is probably the best term for it. But I mean, it's full of beautiful diagrams showing valves and levers and gears and very, very clever.
Many sophisticated hydraulic pumps and water-raising devices were developed by Al-Jazari, one of the most prolific engineers of the Islamic world. Born in the 12th century, he served as a royal engineer at the Artuklu Palace in what is now Turkey. At Istanbul's Museum of the History of Science and Technology in Islam, they've built working models of some of Al-Jazari's water devices. Dr. Detlef Quintern explains them to me.
As you have a look inside this building, you can see a donkey, and this donkey moving a mechanism, bringing into running these gears, as you can see, and then lifting the water up to these channels.
That's quite a sophisticated machine.
It is a sophisticated, I mean, Al-Jazari, he was a more fascinating engineering.
Water devices like Al-Jazari's were hugely important throughout the Islamic world as their empire spread across the globe. Engineers of the Golden Age built reservoirs and impressive dams, many of which still survive today across the Middle East and Islamic Spain. As well as these dams, in places like Cordoba, Iran and Syria, irrigation was also provided by norias from the Arabic na'ura, which are giant scooping water wheels. But as populations grew throughout the Islamic world, it became necessary to have more advanced devices. And towards the end of the 12th century, Al-Jazari developed sophisticated water pumps.
In Islam, followers of the faith are required to pray at specific times during the day, and so knowing the time accurately is very important. Today, clocks like this outside a mosque give the precise times for prayer.
Al-Jazari and other engineers of the Golden Age devised a great many clocks, which were more accurate and elaborate than what had gone before. Al-Jazari wrote about clocks that relied on candles, were driven by weights, or were regulated by water. But his most famous creation was the extravagant elephant clock. The clock tells the time with an indicator at the top, showing the number of hours since sunrise. But the main mechanism for this clock is hidden inside the elephant's belly, a bowl that floats on a water tank, and every half hour creates an eye-catching display. The bowl slowly fills with water from a hole in its bottom and sinks after half an hour. When it sinks, it tugs a series of pulleys and strings, which run all the way to the top of the clock. They connect the bowl to a channel of balls, which is concealed in the top. The tugging of the pulleys and strings causes the channel to tilt, and so one ball is released. This makes the bird on the top spin round, and the time indicator advances. The ball travels through and falls from a falcon's beak into a serpent's mouth, causing it to tilt. And this causes the elephant driver to beat the elephant. As the mechanisms inside the clock are triggered, the floating bowl is pulled back up and starts filling with water again for the next half hour.
But what we do know is that there were incredible engineers and inventors during the Islamic world in the Golden Age, men like Al-Jazari and the Banu Musa brothers, who created incredible mechanisms to build intricate and detailed inventions over 1,000 years ago.